Hey folks, Matt Ryder. How you doing today? It is day 15 of National Poetry Month 2020, and I'm here for some lunch. Woohoo! Lunch poems. I even busted out my old copy of it, which is battered and bruised and taped, closed, but probably, arguably, one of the greatest collections of poems ever. So these go out to Leah and Semolina Artisanal Pastas out in California, out in LA, making some great pasta out there, and check them out online. So I'm going to read some Frank O'Hara poems to you today. Frank O'Hara, like a lot of the poets I studied, were New York school poets that I discovered when I was in West Virginia and Idaho. And Frank O'Hara's poems were some of the first ones that I studied at West Virginia, and felt like, as a New Yorker, hey, Marino's New Yorker. As a New Yorker, I was privy to certain images in the poem. And I really wasn't, because if you read his poems, you are in the poem. You are in New York City, you are on the train, you are walking around with Frank O'Hara. That's the beauty of his poems. I never really saw anything like that at that point in my life. Poems were trying to do, with Shakespeare and Milton and odes and sonnets and stuff like that. And then when I saw poems that were open, that were discussing kind of everyday events, just everyday life events, and the beauty that you could find in those, I thought it was kind of important to pay attention to that. Sorry, I'm moving that. I hate the roof vent that's above me. Sorry, one of my OCDs. Anyway, Frank O'Hara, many OCDs he probably had. An amazing poet, and I'm going to read a couple poems of his. So we'll stick with 3 poems of his today. Some you have heard, some you may have never heard before. Music. If I rest for a moment near the equestrian, pausing for a liver sausage sandwich in the Mayflower shop, that angel seems to be leading the horse into Bergdorf's, and I am naked as a tablecloth, my nerves humming. Close to the fear of war and the stars which have disappeared. I have my hands only 35 cents, which it's so meaningless to eat, and gusts of water spray over the basins of leaves like hammers of a glass pianoforte. If I seem to you to have lavender lips under the leaves of the world, I must tighten my belt. It's like a locomotive on the march, the season of distress and clarity, and my door is open in the evenings of midwinter's lightly falling snow over the newspapers. Clasp me in your handkerchief like a tear, trumpet of early afternoon. In the foggy autumn, as they are putting up the Christmas tree on Park Avenue, I shall see my daydreams walking by with dogs and blankets, put to some use before all of those colored lights come on. But no more fountains, no more rain, and the stores stay open terribly late. A poem called Music. Kind of the poem, entitling the poem Music, and just kind of having that musicality in the poem coming from just everyday ordinary things is just beautiful. 3 airs to Norman Bloom. 1. So many things in the air: soot, elephant balls, a Chinese cloud which is entirely collapsed, a cat swung by its tail, and the senses of the dead which are banging about inside my tired red eyes. 2. In the deeps, there is a little bird, and it only hums. It hums of fortitude and temperance. It is managing a foundry. How firmly it must grasp things, tear them out of the slime, and then, alas, it mischievously drops them into the cauldron of hideousness. There is already a sunset naming, the poplars which see only watery themselves. 3. Oh, to be an angel if there were any, and go straight up into the sky and look around and then come down, not to be covered with steel and aluminum, glaringly ugly in the pure distances and clattering and buckling, wheezing, but to be part of the treetops and the blueness, invisible, the iridescent darkness beyond, silent, listening to the air, becoming no air, becoming air again. I'll just read the hit. The poem that got me into poetry, the poem that made me realize that even though my life was terribly boring and uninteresting, it actually might make some good fodder, some good fuel for poetry. And that has guided me very well throughout my lifetime. It doesn't always have to be about the most major events, but your life happens during these major events. And that's the beauty of your life. Only you could live those events, even though there may be something grand going on around you. And in this case, the passing of beloved singer Billie Holiday. It's really Frank O'Hara's life that's at the showcase here, and you'll see how it ends. And to me, I don't know, it's one of the most beautiful endings in a poem ever. And I'll screw it up because there's tons of stuff in here that I cannot pronounce, but I've read it for years in front of students and it doesn't seem to be bothering anybody. Excuse me. The Day Lady Died by Frank O'Hara. It is 12:20 in New York, a Friday, 3 days after Bastille Day. Yes, it is 1959, and I go get a shoe shine because I will get off the 419 in East Hampton at 7:15 and then go straight to dinner, and I don't know the people who will feed me. I walk up the muggy street, beginning to sun, and have a hamburger and a malted, and buy an ugly New World writing to see what the poets in Ghana are doing these days. I go on to the bank, and Miss Stillwagon, first name Linda I once heard, doesn't even look up my balance for once in her life. And in the Golden Griffin, I get a little Verlaine for Patsy, with drawings by Bonnard. Although I do think of Hesiod, translation Richard Mortimer, or Brendan Behan's new play, or Les Balcons et les Negrets of Genet, but I don't. I stick with Verlaine after practically going to sleep with quandriness. And for Mike, I stroll into the Park Lane liquor store and ask for a bottle of Strega, and then I go back to where I came from, 6th Avenue, to the tobacconist at the Ziegfeld Theater, and ask for a carton of Galois or a carton of Picayunes. And then on the New York Post, I see her face on it. And I'm sweating a lot by now. And thinking of leaning on the John door in the 5 spot while she whispered a song along the keyboard to Mal Waldron, and everyone and I stopped breathing. If I didn't screw up Mal Waldron's name at the end there, it's a really beautiful ending. Anyway, Frank O'Hara, National Poetry Month 2020. Hope you enjoyed. New York, what's up?